Hello and welcome to Hobbymaker's YouTube tutorial channel. My name's Gwen Fletcher, and in this video I'd really love to introduce you to the world of embossing. This involves using a die cutting machine and embossing folders. So let's get started. Embossing folders have been around in different guises for a very long time, and they are a superb addition to your crafty stash. If you've not come across them before, it's something that you might enjoy. So they started out with quite a small scale. These are like a little A6, or in America they'd be called an A2. So they're quite a small size. And what an embossing folder is a double-sided plastic folder like this. And on one side you have the raised pattern, and on the other side you have the debossed pattern, or the sunken in pattern. And the way they work is you pop a piece of card in between, run that through your die cutting machine, and it will then give that pattern to the cardstock, so you can create really beautiful patterns with quite depth to them. So why would I want to do this, and what would I use them for? Well, this is a great way of adding texture and pattern into your projects without having to add even more product or more colour. Sometimes a project can have a little bit of blank space and you may feel that it needs something else, and you might reach for another embellishment or perhaps some gems or something. And it's not always necessary. Sometimes it's just this little bit of texture that's needed. So I have lots of different ones to show you, and they are available in a vast array of patterns and sizes. So as I say, when we first had them in the craft world, they were quite small scale like these ones. They then did get a little bit larger and became 5x7. And these are all from different companies. Lots of companies do these sorts of things, so they're readily available. Then we went slightly bigger to almost an A5 size. And we also then began to see square ones coming along. I think as square cards became more popular, so did square embossing folders. So these are all really beautiful to use on your standard sizes of cardstock. Some of the patterns you'll find you can repeat and actually extend, so you can create bigger panels should you wish to with some of these. So I'm just going to run through a few patterns to give you an idea of the sorts of things that are available. So the first one I showed you was that lovely little snowflake design, and you can see that gives quite a nice all over pattern, and it is quite geometric. So this one's one which would be easy to repeat. And by that, I mean, once you've embossed your first panel, you can slide that along, find the matching panel, and it will lock in. It will sit back into the same matching pattern. And then if you had a larger piece of card, you could continue to emboss. So that's another great use for these as well. Obviously, you do need a die cutting machine. So these smaller ones are great if you've only got a small machine available. 5x7s and the slightly larger will go through a smaller machine, but some of the square ones perhaps might not. So you're not that limited. If you only have a small machine, you can certainly use lots of these. They come in a vast array of patterns and styles, as I've said. So you might find that some of them are quite floral. So this is a lovely little flourish design with tiny blossoms in between. There are also certain folders which give you, instead of an all-over pattern, they might give you a frame, such as this one. This is a poinsettia frame, so more of a festive design. They also come in borders, so just thin strips that you can pop down the side of a card. And then we also have more geometric patterns, so something like this lovely trellis grid, which is great for masculine cards, or if you want something a little less floral, although that would equally suit having vines climbing up it or something like that. And then we also have quite grungy patterns. This one's not exactly grungy, but it is a bit more phased back, shall we say. So this one has straight lines, which again is lovely for a masculine card or just more of a plain card. And then there are really grungy patterns, like for instance this one. If you like a bit more of a mixed media style, then this might be something that would appeal. This one's got distressed coffee rings. So the other thing that these folders give us is not just an emboss, but a deboss. And what do I mean by that? Well, to emboss something in general means to raise it. It's a term used in metal crafting where the pattern is raised by using ball tools on the back side of the metal, so it raises a pattern on the front. Also in stenciling that can be done, and in crafts like parchment craft. These folders give us that without having to do the hard handwork. So every time you emboss a piece of card through an embossing folder, it will give you not only the emboss, so that's the raised pattern, but if we actually take a look at the reverse side of a pattern, we can see that it gives us the deboss, and that means to indent the pattern into the piece of card. So sometimes the back of the pattern can be utilised equally as the raised front side. Not all patterns work with the deboss, but most of them will give you something that you can use on the back. And this gives us access to so many techniques. It's just a fantastic tool to have in your crafting. So another variation that you might come across within the world of embossing folders is the thickness of the pattern that is given to us. So the original embossing folders are referred to as 2D. That means two-dimensional, in that it raises the cardstock a certain amount and it gives a beautiful raised design, something like this one. So this is a really lovely numbers design. Great for birthdays, great for children's cards, celebrations, anything like that. It's lovely. The deboss for this obviously isn't going to work because your numbers are going to be reversed, and the same would apply to anything with text. So the deboss in this case is not going to work. Then we had a development and we began to see 3D embossing folders coming on the market. Now these were much, much deeper patterns. And so we needed to think again about the plates that we needed in our machine. So I have a few here that are 3D, and I think you can see that the pattern there is a lot deeper. And the deboss is obviously deeper as well on the back. And again, these come out in a vast array of styles and patterns. They are really beautiful. And also, some embossing folders became more of a focal point rather than a background. So you start to see actual focal designs coming through in the embossing folders. So it may be a large flower with some leaves, something like that. They've really developed a lot over the last few years. But this is a three-dimensional or a 3D embossing folder. Very, very deep embossing and very, very deep debossing. And then we started to see 3D embossing folders that actually had different levels within the pattern, such as this one here. So these are becoming more and more intricate and more gorgeous, but they give parts of the design that are raised and parts of the design that are sunken in. So the pattern is working on both sides, on both levels. So you start to see really intricate designs like this one, where the flowers, you can see, have got really prominent petals, and then they've got petals that are sunken in, and then behind that there's still a background. So really, you know, different levels appear in these more modern designs. But you do need to work on which plates to choose if you want to emboss something like this, because the folder itself is much thicker. So that's something I'm going to talk about in a moment. But you can see on the back of this one, this is the deboss, and this works beautifully as well. But you can see how some of it is still raised, some of the detail is still raised, but a lot of the petals on the deboss are actually indented rather than being raised. So much variation, so much creativity available at our fingertips, and a very, very easy process to achieve as well. So let me show you how these work. I'm going to start with a 2D embossing folder just to show you which plates you can use in your machine. Okay, so I'm going to use this one, which is a beautiful ornate flourish, and you can see that. And the deboss on this one is lovely as well. So what you need to do is cut your card to size. So this is a 5x7, and then sometimes you might find when you run this through your embossing machine, depending on your cardstock, you might see little cracks appear. So to prevent that from happening, if you just very lightly mist your cardstock and allow that water just to soften the fibres a little bit before you put it through the machine, you should find that that cracking doesn't happen. So we'll pop this into the folder and close it down like that. And then obviously we need our die cutting machine. So I'm going to bring in my spellbinders. I use an old spellbinders machine. It's a large one, but I find this does the job and it suits any type of embossing folder. So with any machine, your manufacturer will have given you instructions and you will have probably a variety of plates. One of those may well be labelled as an embossing plate, and on mine I have that little symbol on the base plate here, and I have the relating plate here. So you may have a plate like this, or you may have a full A4 size plate. It might be thinner than this, it might be thicker than this. It depends on your machine, but you will have something. You will certainly have in the instructions the method to do this. So for a normal 2D embossing folder, you need your base plate in your machine, you need your folder with the card in it, and then you need your embossing plate, and that should be sufficient to produce the embossed cardstock. One tip I would give you is to tilt your embossing folder on an angle so that the corner goes under the rollers first and it's not hitting a full-on hard edge that it might struggle to accept. So just put a little tilt on it, pop your embossing plate over the top of that, and then we can take this through. Now you will feel the pressure here. It's different from when you put a die through your machine. The pressure can be quite strong, but if it really doesn't want to accept it, then don't force it. You need to go back and adjust your plates somehow to reduce that pressure. Maybe that you have something a bit thinner than this. It may be that you could incorporate a metal shim if you have one, or if not, a piece of heavyweight card folded in half makes a really good shim. And then you may find that just your clear cutting plate on your machine is sufficient. So try those out, but don't ever force your machine. Obviously, if you force your machine, you can cause it to burst at the seams literally and cause a lot of damage. So don't ever try to make it do something it's not wanting to do. So we can have a look at this now and we can see how beautiful this embossed piece of card is. It's got lovely deep embossing. There aren't any cracks in the card, and we've got that deboss on the back as well. So really easy process and a really lovely result. So that's for our 2D embossing folders. So how about a 3D embossing folder? So with this one, the pattern is much more deep and the folder is therefore thicker, the plastic is thicker. So I'm just going to pop this piece of card through here. Now I know I'm going to need to adjust the sandwich. So what I used last time, which was my base plate, and this is going to be too thick because this has added thickness. So I need to find a way to reduce the thickness of this. So the first thing I'm going to try is to just use the clear plate, the cutting plate that comes with the machine. And I'm going to run that through, and that should be sufficient to emboss it. But I can feel that there's no pressure and it's not going to emboss that piece of card very well. So I need to somehow ramp up the thickness. So I'm going to put my universal metal shim underneath my embossing folder, and then I'm going to use the clear plate again. So I've just added a very minute amount of extra thickness, but now I can feel that's working. The pressure's there and it's doing its job. So this is something you need to work out with your machine, but you will be able to do it. There are lots of additional platforms available through all the manufacturers, so you may have to invest in something else, but in the meantime, hopefully those little ideas should help. So now we can see that we've got this beautiful, really deep etched pattern, and it's a lot deeper than that first one was. And we've also got a beautiful deboss that we can actually utilise and incorporate into our cards as well. So that's the basic performance of how you need to use an embossing folder. And now I'd like to move on to talk about how we would use these, what materials can we use with these, and all sorts of things like that. So let's do that. I'd love it if you would give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, and please subscribe to Hobby Maker's YouTube tutorial channel, and I'll see you next time.